So this is my latest little model engine that I've been working on, and this time I haven't built this myself. This is actually a vintage engine. I bought this, it was in parts, completely sort of disassembled. There wasn't much assembled about 12 months ago, and it's kind of been sat in a drawer waiting for me to do something with it for 12 months. And recently I decided it might be time to bring this machine back to life. Now, I've done a little bit of research. As far as I can tell, I might be wrong here, but looking at the cylinder and the design of the engine itself, I believe it's a Stevens Model Dockyard engine, which is a company which was sort of founded in 1843 in London, and they made and sold sort of models and toys and castings for model engineers, steamboats, locos, Meccano and stuff like that. And obviously there's a 1919 catalogue. There's not much reference to them after sort of 1919, so whether the First World War sort of ended there, there's a fly in here, so whether the First World War sort of took toll on their company and it closed, I'm not really sure. I mean, if anybody has any information about that, I'd be interested to know. But like I say, as far as I can tell, it's a Stevens Model Dockyard cylinder, and you could buy just the cylinders, or you could buy complete engines or complete castings, etc, etc. And there's a very similar model to this in the 1919 catalogue, but it has like a nice sort of shaped casting with the crosshead guides sort of built into the casting. So I can only imagine that whoever owned this originally didn't have the resources perhaps to afford the castings, and they've built it simply out of 1 inch by a 1/4 inch brass bar, and it's actually quite beautiful, really. Like I say, this came to me, it was very in quite a bad state, really. The brass, you could tell, was brass obviously, but the nuts and bolts, etc, were all very rusty. There wasn't a flywheel, there wasn't a crank connecting arm, there wasn't a big end, and so I've had to kind of work out, and also, yeah, there was no way of supporting the cylinder to the top of these bars, and I had no idea how that would have originally have been done. So what I've done is I've obviously cleaned it all up, I made a piece that is sort of sandwiched. I've sandwiched that in between the cylinder and the bottom cover of the cylinder as a support bracket, and that's made out of aluminium. It's painted black here, same as the crosshead guides. They didn't exist in the original engine. I did have the crosshead, but no guides, no supports, etc. So I've also made those out of aluminium, and then obviously, well, that's 1/4 inch square mild steel recessed into the aluminium support pieces. And I've finally got it back up and running. I've built, like I say, the big end is a piece of brass, well, made out of brass with a collar there to stop it working its way off. That's made out of phosphor bronze, and of course it didn't have a flywheel either. So this was actually a flywheel from RDG Tools. It was advertised as a 4-inch flywheel, but it's actually a 3 3/4 inch flywheel. And all I've done with that actually is border hole central, so it's a little bit, it runs off a little bit, but you know, for an engine of this age, I'm not really too fussed about that. Now the valve, it seemed to have a lot of, I tried to get it up and running once I'd built it, once I'd made all the new parts, and it ran extremely lumpy and it wasn't very happy at all. And I looked at the valve, and the valve was, well, it seemed to me a much larger, much longer than it needed to be. And that may have been like steam lap, you know, it's a lap which allows for the, you know, so it closes early, and obviously if you're using steam, steam continues to expand, and it might have been due to that, but I just could not get it running satisfactorily. So I shortened the valve slightly, and it runs much nicer now actually. Whether it will run on steam or not is another thing, but I'm sure it will. So anyway, enough of me waffling on. I'm going to just get a little bit of compressed air on this, and you can see how it runs. It's still a bit lumpy, still makes a few noises. I mean, it's an old engine, but as you can see, it seems to turn over quite nicely. So a few of the dimensions, like I've said, it's 3 1/4 inch flywheel. I have no idea what the original size of the flywheel should have been, but it's the cylinder itself is a 7/8 of an inch cylinder bore. It's got a 1.5 inch stroke and a 1/4 of an inch eccentric throw down from the eccentric gear down there. I've made a block, a hardwood block, and recessed the original brass plate into there, which funnily enough as well looked like it had been hammered flat rather than actually a flat piece of brass. It was very uneven, but I've managed to sort out those problems. A lot of the screws were extremely rusty. I've managed to save the top cylinder screws, and I've used the best of what was available, but most of the original screws had become so rusty that I've actually re-tapped those out and put in fresh, brand new stainless steel screws there. In fact, most of the screws, except the top cover and also the valve block screws, all the others are non-original except for those. But you know, it's a restoration, so you know there's only so far you can go. And as you can see, it runs pretty beautiful. One other thing which had me a bit puzzled was that there is a flat on the actual crankshaft, but if you set the eccentric set on that flat, it just doesn't run. So it's actually around 45 degrees from that flat. So I'm not sure quite what the original maker had in mind, but I'm sure he had it up running at some point. There was sort of wear on the main port face. You could see where it had the valve had moved up and down, so there was a little bit of wear. So we obviously had it running at some point, but obviously, you know, I've restored it back to as much as original condition as I possibly can. I've had to put a plug in the top there. There was a tapped hole, and there was also a large hole in the top of there, which I've tapped and put a plug in. They're actually quite useful because I can take those out and drop a bit of oil in. The only other thing I've done is I've added a extended exhaust port. There's just basically a big hole in there, so I've turned a little piece of brass up to extend that out, and that's about it really. I can't really think of anything else to tell you. Obviously the wooden block I had to make, and bought a sort of you know, a gap there to allow the crank arm to turn. There's also a little bit of an extend there to allow the crank arm to turn. There's about half an inch of extended shaft from the end of the flywheel, so I could fit I could fit something on there so that it could actually run something, do something. But otherwise, it's quite a nice engine. It's a little bit leaky. I've built paper gaskets to go in between the seals, in between the cylinder, to seal the cylinder. There is one little screw hole that sort of bubbles up with a bit of oil, and well, I've painted this in sort of red oxide colour, and the only reason for that is on the crank there is a tiny little speck of paint which is that same colour as this red oxide colour. So I could only assume that originally there was some of that colour on this machine, so I've sort of copied that to try and sort of replicate what the original designer had in mind. And hopefully, I mean, whoever he was out there many years ago who built this engine, maybe they're looking down and thinking, wow, it's finally been restored. It'd be nice to think so. Of course, I don't really believe in all that sort of stuff, but there you go. A lovely engine, and I'll just crank it up now and give you some idea of how it can run. Nice to get an old vintage engine back up and running.